Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins. I'm joined by Senator Andrew Bragg as we talk about the role government can play in making Australia a world-class fintech innovation hub. Senator Bragg led the first fintech inquiry, and he's since become an integral part of the ecosystem. He's been a big supporter of the industry and has made a positive impact over this last 18 months. He shares his views on crypto, superannuation, CDR, and gives his advice on how founders can work successfully with governments. Tune in for what turned out to be a really enjoyable chat with a politician who gets stuff done. Before we chat to Senator Bragg, I just want to share with you a live show that we've got coming up where I'm going to be inviting Claire Alexander from TrueLayer to come and answer all of the questions that you've got on fintech careers, job searching, and generally what the market's like. If you've got a specific question you want to ask us, email info@tier1people.com. Senator Bragg, welcome to the show.
Dexter, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks. And you got the honour of being the very first politician that we've had on the show, and well over 130 interviews we've done now.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm also trialling some new technology here, which is a new microphone. And so hopefully it all goes okay.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Excellent.
Well, a lot of my listeners might be asking why I've got a politician on the show, but you've been heavily involved in the fintech industry for at least the last 2 years that I can remember. How did you get interested in fintech, and what's the role that you're playing in the industry?
Well, Dexter, you must have lost a bet to have a politician on your program. So I'm hoping it wasn't a physically painful bet. But look, I mean, I've been in the Parliament for 2 years now, and one of the first things I was asked to do was to chair an inquiry into fintech. And my professional background was in financial services. I didn't know much about it at all, but I was very interested in how I could facilitate policy to give people more choice and more competition. And what I've tried to do in my 18 months in the job, which is about to come to an end, is produce policy for government that was digestible and deliverable. And along the way, I've been able to meet tons of interesting people.
Excellent. Now, you talked there about tons of interesting people. It is a colourful kind of industry. What is it that you think is the kind of key challenge for the fintech industry in working with government successfully?
Well, government is very hard to deal with. Government is a long way away from the market in general terms, and it's a very, very long way away from the market in terms of this disruptive world of fintech. So the biggest problem that fintech people have is a lack of understanding on the other side of the equation when they're talking to people in government. And what I've tried to do is to spend as much time as possible with the sector so that I could at least try and help bridge that gap. But I mean, this is a normal thing for disruptive industries to have to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's not as if fintech is Robinson Crusoe here.
Yeah. It's one of the frustrations that I actually have is, when I hear founders talk, their expectations on what government is there to do, I kind of almost feel like turning around and saying, but hang on a second, you're meant to be an entrepreneur. Isn't it up to you to solve this problem? What is it think that the problems that a government can solve versus the ones that they can't?
Well, I mean, the key thing I'd say to people who are in fintech is, I mean, don't outsource your issues to, lobbyists and to everyone else. Try and get in the door and see the policies yourself and explain the issues you're having. I mean, I think this is the biggest mistake people make in working with government. They think that sending around a gun for hire lobbyist who's dealing with 5 or 6 different sector issues a day is going to be a solution. I mean, it just doesn't work. As well as you're the head of a fintech company, which it may only be a small company, may not have any employees, but you have a problem. You think that Canberra can solve it. You should go to Canberra and explain your issue, or at least meet with your local representative. I mean, that is a very important thing that I think too few people do. So I encourage people to do that. I mean, the reality is it is in the interests of every politician to make fintech work, because I see fintech at its heart as giving people more choice and freeing people from institutions which have too much power inside our economy and inside our society. So the alignment of interests is there.
Now, I've worked closely with Fintech Australia over the years, and one of the challenges that I've observed that they've got as an industry body is there's so many, I call them the derivatives of fintech, where you got payments and buy now, pay later, you got crypto and blockchain, you've got insurtech, you've got regtech, and everybody has a completely different set of problems and agenda. I can imagine it must have been quite, almost like drinking from the fire hose when you first engaged with Fintech Australia and you had all of these different challenges and problems being thrown at you. How did you go through and kind of categorize, hey, well, which are the opportunities, or which are the areas of fintech that really could have a significant impact on the GDP and the success of Australia as a nation?
It's a really interesting question, and I haven't really thought of this before, but when we produced the first report, which was back in 2019, I think it was. No, it was in 2020. It was the first parliamentary inquiry that had ever been held into fintech in Australia, and one of the first in the world. And so there were a whole bunch of issues around R&D tax incentives and buy now, pay later, and all those sorts of things, which we just wanted to bring together into a digestible document, which we did, which I sort of described as here are the here and now issues. And I wanted that to free us up so we could look at the longer term issues in the back end of the review. And the way it's worked out, Dexter, is that in this last phase of the review, which we're in now, we've done a deep dive, and I hate that expression, deep dive, but we are doing a deep dive into cryptocurrency and digital assets, which I think strategically is very important for Australia, that we have a plan and we have a policy on these issues. But we would never have been able to do that unless we dealt with the here and now issues back at the beginning of 2020. So I guess I was driven by the immediacy of and the urgency of pulling together the loose ends as a first step, and then taking a step back and looking at what needed more time. I mean, the crypto issues have needed a lot of time. We've needed to have public hearings. We've needed to take, almost 100 submissions to get through the detail. We couldn't have rushed it in the first 6 months.
Now, other than the president of El Salvador, I think you're the only government official that I've heard supporting crypto and blockchain and digital assets. How have you been able to, I guess, get some legitimacy with your peers and other government officials around how much of a role this could play in the future of Australia?
Look, I think people are naturally risk averse when it comes to these things. My view is that there is enormous opportunity for Australia in utilising, DeFi and digital assets in our economy. And so therefore we need to have a plan for it. And I haven't extolled the virtues of any particular asset or any particular product, but I have extolled the virtue of doing something in this space because of the volume of money and opportunity that will be there. And I know how long it takes to get stuff done in our system of government. We've been talking about having a broader range of investment vehicles for 15 years in the investment management space, and we're only just getting a corporate collective investment vehicle on the table now, which is some 12 or 13 years after the Johnson Review, which looked at Australia's competitive position. So I want us to be an early mover in terms of having a policy plan for crypto to basically do two things: to attract new business to Australia, but also to protect consumers.
And do you think we'll go down the path of a CBDC?
Well, I mean, traditionally the payments policy has been held tightly by the Reserve Bank. I don't think the Reserve Bank needs to have independence over payments policy. I think it needs to have monetary policy independence, which is a different thing. And so far, the Reserve Bank has had an effective monopoly on this judgment. Personally, I am looking very closely at what we should be doing here, and we'll make some statements about this in the final report, which is due in about under 1 month from now. And what I'm saying is, look, it's not really fair for police to outsource this judgment to the Reserve Bank, which is an unelected body. The elected government should have a view on this, informed by the Treasury's advice.
And so we kind of heard at the weekend, China have come out again and, banned cryptocurrencies, and they're going down the path of their own digital currency. What do you see as the kind of threat, around sovereignty? There was, when Facebook came out with Libra, I think that was one of the initial reactions was, is this a threat to sovereignty? What's the kind of threat that we face as a nation if China does go ahead with this and kind of gets a head start on everybody?
Well, I think the most important thing is that there is dynamism in the private sector and in the payments sector. And I think that the innovation has often happened despite policymakers in Australia. And so we need to make sure that we are driving towards the maximum possible amount of disruption and innovation in the payments space. In terms of what the national government issues and how it issues currencies, I think that is a more complicated judgment. But my initial sense is that we should look very hard at issuing a retail central bank digital currency, especially given some of the competitive issues we're looking at in the digital wallet space, where effectively, because of regulatory arbitrage, Apple and Google own large parts of the payment system that we're using today, which are only going to grow tomorrow. The way that Apple runs its digital wallets is, very much a closed shop. And so we need to, I think, have much stronger policies in this space.
One of the areas that I think is still massively untouched from a fintech perspective and disruptive perspective is superannuation. I often give people the opportunity to do the book plug, as I call it, to share good news, but you actually have got a book plug and wrote a book on the subject. What is it that you see as the role that fintech can play in really disrupting the superannuation space?
Well, superannuation is a huge bet that the country has taken, that we will get people off the pension and save the taxpayer money over time. But all the projections show that the system will cost more than it saves the taxpayer. You'll get very few people off the pension. And so I think the risk is we end up with a system which enriches the unions and the financial institutions, but doesn't do much for Australians who are forced to put 10% of their wages into these funds they have no control over. I think the fintechs, and there's a whole bunch of them that are in this space now, that are looking to challenge the major super fund incumbents by giving people more choices, better flexibility, and they're gearing them towards the millennials. I think they are essential. They are essential. I mean, superannuation is the biggest closed shop probably in Australia, given how much money flows into these funds compulsorily. So, super fintechs are much needed.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of size, the Australian superannuation market is the same, or it's bigger than the global crypto market. So it shows the absolute opportunity there for businesses to really come in and make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's lots of money, for better or worse, and there hasn't been much innovation in the space. I mean, people have taken the system and the money for granted. They haven't had to work very hard for money. I mean, who can think of any other? There's no other industry in the country where you open the door and the money just falls in.
Yeah,
and that's what happens in super.
Yeah. What do you think is the if you had a kind of magic wand, what would be the changes that you'd like to see in the industry?
Well, we've already legislated very important changes which now require super funds to undergo a performance test. I mean, isn't it unbelievable that after 30 years there wasn't even a performance test? So they now have a performance test which they resisted. There's now a best financial interest test which will require them to not waste the workers' money. During the weekend we had the footy finals on and there were never-ending super fund ads, so we'll be very interested to see how those satisfy the new legal test. And we also passed laws to end the endless gravy train of multiple accounts. What I think we should also look to do is to make the future fund available as a default fund for workers or as a fund that workers could choose to go into. And I'd also like to see much stronger fund governance and transparency if we are going to proceed with this system over the long term. But we have achieved those reforms which were very significant only just this year. So I give great credit to Josh Frydenberg and Jane Hume.
It's speaking of Senator Hume, one of the pivotal moments for me, having been in this industry from the early days of 2015, was 2 years ago when I was in Singapore for the Fintech Festival. And I very much kind of got the impression that Australia had turned up to a gunfight with a knife, where we had, India, Vietnam, all of these huge stands. I think Australia, we had a pull-up banner and some people dishing out flyers. And Senator Hume and the energy that she brought to that event, I think for me was really a kind of turning point in how government was now viewing the potential and the size of the opportunity that fintech presents. As you kind of look back over this last 2 years that you've been involved, Senator Bragg, where do you see now fintech in Australia on a global stage, and where do you think we're playing?
There is no question that Australia has made it. I mean, we've got half a dozen unicorns. One of our major fintechs is the subject of a takeover bid from Square. Companies are coming here to list on our exchange. So if you think about Australia historically in terms of a technology policy country, fintech has been the greatest of successes, because who can think of any other tech sector where foreign companies come to list in Australia, where there are takeovers of Australian innovative companies or proposed takeovers on this scale, and meanwhile Australian fintechs are exporting expertise into other jurisdictions. So the Australian fintech system has been a success. I would give great credit to the sector leaders, people who've come up with the ideas, but also the investors. There are some significant investors that have gone out of their way to develop this ecosystem. People like Paul Bassett and Nikki Skevic and a whole lot of other people like that. And there's been some brilliant minds. I mean, whether it's been Ant Eason or Eisen, I should say, or Peter Gray or some of these other people behind Safety Culture, they're fine minds. And then what they've had from Canberra has been a lot of support. I think the PM and the Minister Hume, I think, have been very supportive. And what we've had over the course of this parliament has been this process, this fintech select inquiry, which has been able to pick up issues as they've gone along. Now, this fintech inquiry finishes in 4 weeks from now, so we'll have to think of what we're going to do in the next parliament. But I think there's been a good collaboration between Canberra and the private economy, which is a really good template for Australia.
Now, we're nearly 20 minutes in and we haven't mentioned CDR once. which I think is pretty remarkable. I remember, I think this was 2018, and got to meet the PM at an awards ceremony, and at the time he was treasurer, and he gave a rather impassioned speech around the future of Australia and how open banking would play a big role in that. So far, delivered on the promise of making CDR a real thing. What do you see as the opportunity there, Senator Bragg, and what do you think kind of needs to happen for it to kind of move to the next level?
Well, I mean, it's early days for CDR, and I think that the policy can encompass other things. It can do telco, it can do super. It might be able to do other things that big tech do today. And I think that the concept of open banking, of course, is a simple one to understand. But I think it will take some time to really get to critical mass. I mean, it's still very hard to change, especially mortgages. Very hard.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, especially as we get into the next parliamentary term, make sure that it is making it easy for people to refinance their mortgages or to move their mortgages, which is the hardest thing, and it's the biggest transaction of your life for the average person. So, I'm not sure whether we've made it a complete success yet, but I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. And I guess, we've seen as well around the credit risk models, which, you'd have to say are really outdated for the world in which we live in now. People don't have jobs for life. In fact, I think most of my network I would see cycle through a job every 12 to 24 months. We got situations now where there are people who are, they're never going to be able to afford to put down a deposit on a house and therefore will never get on the ladder. What role do you think CDR can kind of play in actually helping to redefine things like credit risk models? And we've seen to a small extent buy now, pay later, kind of alter or kind of change the credit model as well?
Well, I think that I think that in terms of CDR, I think, as I say, I think we are where we are on that at this juncture. I mean, we made recommendations in the first report of the Fintech inquiry that it should be moved away from the ACCC, but it wasn't appropriate that they had policy-making authority. We moved that into the Treasury. That was accepted by the government, by the executive government. And actually, we've had quite a lot of those recommendations adopted, I should say, which is quite a high strike rate. When you look at some of these reports that just go to dust, I'd say that our reports have produced a lot of executed policy, which is something that we're aiming for in this next report, which is due in the next few weeks. I mean, we're clearly now getting towards the part of the electoral cycle where there's not going to be opportunities for us to legislate new ideas, given the timetable we now have until the next election. And so what we're now wanting to do is to get as much bipartisan support for the recommendations that are in this last report.
What's we've seen with COVID, the industry's been remarkably resilient. In fact, you'd have to say it's thrived rather than survived during the last 18 months. What do you think has been the kind of catalyst for that?
Well, I just think the industry the times have suited the industry, right? I mean, in terms of people have had to be online, people have had to look for innovative solutions to their problems. And so therefore tech-based solutions have worked. If you think about how the country got through the pandemic with digital signatures and the like, all facilitated by fintech companies. Even things like using broader use of QR codes, digital wallets. There's been Australia is already a country which has a high and rapid adoption of new technologies. But I do think that the times have really suited fintech. I think that 7 or 8 years ago, maybe people said it would be the end of checks by, I think the checks finished a couple of years ago, last year was 2020. I mean, it's highly unlikely that we'll have paper money in 5 or 10 years from now. So I think there's a natural advantage that fintech has just by virtue of what it is. And so whilst there were concerns that the whole sector could have been lost at the beginning of the pandemic, that didn't happen. The other thing was, Dexter, that there was a remarkable level of fiscal support that the federal government put under the sector through JobKeeper, which was available to almost any business that met the criteria. And so basically businesses were paid by the government to keep going where they had a downturn.
So when you look back over the kind of last 18 months, what would you say you're most proud of?
Well, the fact that we've actually had an inquiry which has delivered real policy that has been adopted, and whether it be administrative, like having the CDR moved to the Treasury, or whether it be the government changing direction on its position on R&D funding, people who've engaged with our committee have seen real results. I also think that we had a lot of success in making sure that ASIC didn't hobble innovation, especially when you look at things like buy now, pay later. I mean, there was a whole campaign to sort of destroy buy now, pay later, which was, and you think about some of the recommendations in the first report around screen scraping and the like. There was a concerted campaign amongst some of the traditional financial institutions with some other groups to try and stop that innovation because for commercial and economic reasons. And I think it was important that the committee's recommendations maintained that level of competition and choice which was emerging. And so I guess the thing I'm most proud of as a representative is that we've been able to work with people, often very small businesses, 1 or 2 people, who've had ideas and concerns, and we've been able to fix them. And this has happened during a period.
That doesn't sound like government.
Well, that's true. I mean, the screen scraping one. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a bit of a while ago, but I would meet with small businesses that were relying upon that particular method for their business to provide new options for people, and they were doing it in a way which was safe. And some of the biggest financial institutions in the country were trying to take it away from them, even though they were using a variation of the same practices inside their businesses. So I'm glad that we held the line on that. And I guess what I'm most excited about now, Dexter, is the prospect of delivering Australia's first policy and first plan on cryptocurrency and digital assets. I'm very excited about that. And I think that we can get ahead of many other competitor jurisdictions. And I guess my focus will be to try and get my party to adopt as much of this as policy as they can.
Fantastic. You're going to be speaking at NFT Fest this week as well.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I'm looking forward to doing that talk. It's I'm going to be flagging some of the principles that we're going to deploy in the final report, which include that key balance around we want to have more investment into this space. We want to protect consumers. Yeah. Secondly, that I will be looking as chair to treasury solutions. I don't think we solve these digital asset problems through, trying to create something in the industry portfolio. I think we want to be looking at mainstreaming these issues through the treasury portfolio. So what I mean by that is we'll look as we did with the CDR to treasury solutions. And so rather than us saying, okay, we're going to make crypto businesses that are markets get the same license as the ASX, we're not going to do that, but we'll look at what sort of additional licenses we could create under the Treasury banner. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that we're about to go to Glasgow. I'm very interested in Glasgow because my forebears are from Glasgow, and we wanted to take a net zero commitment on carbon emissions, and I think it's very important that we don't allow Australia to undermine our position through, Bitcoin mining. I mean, we don't want to burn out the grid with Bitcoin mining. And so we need to think about, okay, if we want to have this industry, and I think it's an important sector, we want to do it on a renewable basis.
Mm. One of the things that really struck me when I was in Singapore for the FinTech Festival was how a lot of these industries now, the boundaries seem to be blurring, and it's very difficult to tell, where one begins and one ends. Do you see then, there's an opportunity for, you to kind of play across other portfolios and have an influence and take, what you've seen in FinTech and apply that to other portfolios?
Well, that all depends on where I end up, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's that's really the matter for the Prime Minister to decide.
Yeah.
But
well, if it doesn't work out the way that you planned, please get in touch, because with your ability to get shit done in tough circumstances, I'm sure you'd make a great hire for many of my clients.
Well, yeah. Well, look, I mean, I guess I've committed myself to spending this part of my career in public service, and I love doing the job. I mean, I'm interested in people. I'm fascinated by, what we can do to improve Australia. I'm patriotic. Of course, I love my country, and I think that there are great things you can do in public office if you're connected to the right people. And I can't do my job unless I spend a lot of time listening and engaging with people, and that has to happen away from Canberra. So I guess, look, I don't want to have a whinge, but like many Australians, you're over your Zooms and your Teams meetings. But, it's a real privilege to be able to walk into your kitchen, put your laptop down and do your work. I mean, that's just not been possible to people who are in construction or personal care sectors. And, I think the pandemic has been really shocking for people who are in those personal care sectors, or they're travel agents, or they're in hospitality or tourism. But if you work for the government, I mean, it's probably been quite a good crisis for many people. So I think what we have to do as we come out of this period is we have to be prepared to spend more money on helping small businesses get back on their feet, particularly those in those sectors.
Yeah. Now, I guess, we kind of coming to a close. I mentioned the book before. Where can people find out more about that?
I didn't even give you the plug. I mean, look.
I know, it's terrible. I mean, I was giving you the honest on a platter, right? And you didn't even take it.
I mean, look, I mean, the book is a plan to fix super. So that was a book I wrote last year, and then this year the book I wrote was Bragg, which is a case for reconciliation. So those books, Bragg you can buy through Amazon if you want to. It's an audio book that I recorded myself, or an ebook, or a paperback. And Bad Egg I think you can get through Court Publishing. So look, I have found that writing stuff down is good thinking for me. The good writing is good thinking. It helps you formulate your ideas. And some of my friends think I'm crazy, but I do think that writing books and writing letters is a very important part of being an effective advocate.
Absolutely. And where's the best place for people to follow you?
Well, I mean, people can just get in touch with me directly if they want to send me a note, which is just senator.bragg@aph.gov.au, and then I'm on Twitter and Instagram are my preferred forums for social media, and I believe we're also quite active on Facebook and LinkedIn. But look, my social media of choice, I guess, is Instagram. I quite like the simplicity of the photos. I feel like people are much kinder there. I mean, Twitter is really a sewer. But
I mean, as a non-politician, it's a dangerous place, right?
It's dangerous, but I think you've got to be in there. And I mean, that the vast bulk of the Australian population are not on Twitter. They're probably on Facebook. So look, Instagram, maybe I prefer that because it's a bit nicer. But I've just started going onto Reddit and to TikTok actually. in a quest to try and talk with younger people, because we found that particularly the cryptocurrency issues are of great interest to younger people. And there's a survey by Finder which shows that 1 in 4 Australians almost has cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Well,
the vast majority of which are younger people.
My kids are 10 and 9 and they've got an interest in it. And, it's understandable because all of the games that they play have their own native currencies in there. And so whilst they're not crypto investors, I think the reality is for them as they turn into adults, they're going to be native with digital currencies, NFTs. I mean, they talk about how much of their Robux they spend on creating their avatar. And when I explain the concept of them, the NFTs, and that they could actually own that avatar and take it to them in any game, their mind's blown. So I think very much, as we can look at history, but I think the reality is that it's the future generations that will decide where we're going, not the past.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have to say I'm very happy with being Mario. My favourite character was the Mario with the ears and the tail, the one that would fly. That was always my favourite Mario. So having just recently invested in a Nintendo, the latest version, I have to say I'm very excited that all those old games are still on the same old characters. So I must be very boring.
I wasted many, many, many days on the N64 and Mario Kart.
Well, I think it's good for you. I mean, it's a good break, I think, and a good thing to do with some friends. And but look, in terms of the modern gaming, I can't say I'm an expert in that, and it's probably something I should be thinking about a bit more. So yeah.
So I guess in the spirit of NFT Fest, CryptoPunk or Bored Ape, which one's you?
Which one am I?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm probably I'm not sure I'm any of them, to be honest. I mean, I'm open to offers, but I should probably imagine what sort of appropriate avatar I could have, given that people who work with me are always worried about taking too many risks with these things.
Yeah, there you go. Right, well, there's an opportunity there, NFTs for politicians.
Yeah. So make sure you keep it. It doesn't have to be too conservative, but don't do anything too crazy. And send me any ideas you might have.
Well, Senator Bragg, it's been really good to have you on the show. A lot of fun for what I was thinking might be a bit dry has turned out to be anything but. Great to have you on, and good luck with the future. And on behalf of the fintech community, look, thanks for everything that you've done. It's been really great to have a politician come in and really kind of make themselves part of the community. I think it's really refreshing, and it's certainly changed my view on the role that government plays and how you can work collaboratively together.
Thanks, Dexter. Look, it's been fantastic, and I'm sad that our time together is coming to an end, not only on this podcast but also through the committee. But I'm very keen to stay connected to the fintech community, so I'll be looking for opportunities to do that. So people shouldn't become strangers. People should stay in touch with me. It's something that I'm keen to stay in touch with for as long as the people of New South Wales are willing to put up with me as one of their representatives.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dexter. Cheers.
And you can connect with me, Dexter Cousins, on LinkedIn and Twitter. For early access to new shows and updates on the latest exclusive opportunities through Tier 1 People, subscribe to our newsletter by visiting the Fintech Chatter page on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, remember to press follow on your favorite podcast player, and please consider leaving us a review. It really does help me in bringing in great guests and help fintech fans like you discover the show. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you launch, scale, and innovate by delivering world-class talent. And you can find out more at tier1people.com. Until the next episode, stay safe